Imagine a morning kitchen. The house is, completely quiet. Sun is just starting to come up.
Right.
You walk in to make coffee, and there on the floor is this clear plastic trap that you set the night before.
Yep, we've all been there.
Right. And inside that little plastic box is a dab of peanut butter. And sitting right next to it, just completely contained, is a live mouse. But here's the thing, it isn't thrashing, it isn't panicking. It's just sitting there perfectly still, staring out at the room.
Which is so unsettling.
It really is. Why does this tiny, seemingly insignificant moment just completely break our human brains?
Welcome to today's deep dive.
It's such a beautifully unsettling image to start with, and it's actually the exact scenario that kicks off this incredible essay called A Mouse in the Trap.
Yeah.
It was written by Levin A. Moten for his channel Uncompressed Thinking. And that philosophy, that idea of uncompressed thinking, that's really what we're unpacking today for you listening, because normally when you want to understand human nature or psychology, your first instinct is to go hunting for these massive abstract topics, right?
Like global economics or historical eras, big sweeping things.
Exactly. But Moten argues that you don't actually need to look for those big topics to find profound truths. You just need to start with a real moment, like literally a mouse in a plastic box.
Yeah. And the key is that you refuse to simplify it too quickly.
Right.
That is the absolute core of his approach. The goal is to let a single confined moment expand naturally.
Expand naturally.
Exactly. In fact, Moten specifically models this approach after the way Ray Bradbury, the sci-fi author.
Yeah, I love Bradbury.
Right. How Bradbury let seemingly small, confined scenarios expand into these really profound science fiction stories, like in his famous one, There Will Come Soft Rains.
Oh, that is such a good story.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And Moten uses that exact same methodology on his channel. You take the moment, and instead of instantly labeling it like, oh, it's a pest problem, and tossing the trap in the trash.
Which is what most of us would do.
Exactly. Instead of doing that, you sit with it. You actually look at all the intersecting layers of biology, architecture, and fear that are just colliding right there on your kitchen floor.
Okay, so let's sit with it. We've got the trap. It was just a casual decision, right? Basic home maintenance.
Yeah.
And the peanut butter is, when you think about it, essentially this primitive algorithm. Trial, success, memory. We know rodents like it.
Right, it's predictable.
But now, morning reveals what the night set in motion. The system worked, the mouse is caught. But if you're picturing this mouse, you're probably imagining it freaking out.
Totally.
Like biting the plastic, scratching, doing literally everything it can to escape.
But it doesn't do any of that. The author actually notes the absolute lack of a theatrical struggle. There is only this cold economical precision. The mouse is simply adapting to its newly altered boundary conditions.
It just accepts the box.
Yeah, it realizes the space has shrunk and it recalibrates instantly.
Okay, I have to say, I find that cold precision almost eerier than panic.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if a trapped animal panics, that makes sense to us. We get panic. But this hyper-efficient recalibration, it forces a reaction from you. You can't just ignore it.
No, you can't. And the physical description the author gives makes it even stranger. He focuses on the mouse's eyes.
Right.
They are disproportionately large for its head, but they aren't expressive in any human sense at all.
Not like a cartoon mouse.
Not at all. They're just registering the environment, scanning and processing. The mouse occupies this incredibly strange perceptual space for us.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we recognize it as a living processing entity, right? But it is completely unaligned with our human emotional models.
Oh, I see.
You look into its eyes and you don't see sadness or anger or pleading. You just see raw biological processing.
Which perfectly sets up the central conflict of the essay. So, two people walk into the kitchen and see the exact same mouse in the exact same trap.
Yeah.
The author's wife sees it and recoils instantly. It's this visceral, non-negotiable reaction of fear and disgust.
Total avoidance.
Right. But the author sees the exact same mouse, and his reaction is to lean closer with curiosity. Now, my first instinct is to just say, well, some people are jumpy and some people are curious. Like, is he really trying to argue there's more to it than just basic personality differences?
He absolutely is. He insists this divergence isn't just personality, it is structural.
Structural, like literally how the brain is wired.
Yes. If you look at the human brain as an information processing system, you have the exact same visual input fed into two different brains.
A small moving animal in a box.
Exactly. But the outputs are absolute opposites. Complete recoil versus deep engagement. And to understand why that structural split happens, we have to examine the literal physics of how a mouse exists in space.
You mean how it moves? Because, I mean, they do not move like the animals we actually invite into our homes.
Not at all.
If you think about a dog has this biomechanical telegraphing. Like, if my dog is going to run across the living room, he shifts his weight, his posture drops. He might even look at the spot he's about to run to.
Right, you can read his intentions.
Exactly. I can extrapolate his trajectory before he even takes a step.
And that predictability makes us feel safe. But a mouse operates on high-frequency, low-predictability motion.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
A mouse can accelerate instantly from a dead stop. It changes direction abruptly, with zero physical warning. And then it just vanishes into boundaries we can't access.
Like under the stove?
Yeah, a tiny crack under the baseboard, a gap behind the fridge. This specific pattern of motion acts like a trigger for human neurology.
It reminds me of a sudden rustle in the dark or, a weird flicker in your peripheral vision.
Exactly.
It totally bypasses the logical brain and hits those ancient, deep-seated threat detection systems.
It does. But here is the critical split. One brain processes that high-frequency, unpredictable motion as an anomaly requiring analysis.
It wants to figure it out.
Right, it wants to lean in and find the pattern. But the other brain processes the exact same motion as a terrifying loss of control. It triggers an immediate physical withdrawal.
Wow. And it isn't just the movement, is it? It's the scale, too.
Oh, scale is huge here.
Nemotin talks about mice existing in this unstable middle zone. Like if an animal is large, a deer, a bear, a big dog, we have to engage with it. It occupies our physical scale.
It demands our attention.
Right. And if an organism is tiny, like an ant or a housefly, we just dismiss it. It's too small to threaten our spatial dominance.
But the mouse sits right in the middle of that spectrum. It is not big enough to demand our respect, but it is absolutely too big to ignore.
Yeah, it's almost like the uncanny valley, but for scale and empathy.
That is a great comparison.
We see those large eyes we talked about. We get a partial sense of anthropomorphism because we know it's a conscious, observing creature, but then the connection just completely breaks down because we can't communicate with it.
It moves in that way that defies our prediction.
Exactly. We desperately want to map our emotions onto it so we can understand it. We want it to be like a tiny person in a fur coat, like in a Disney cartoon.
Right, right.
But the biology refuses to cooperate. The mapping fails. And for some people, that failure is fascinating. But for others, it's deeply repulsive.
Yeah.
But wait, this brings up a tricky point. The author uses his wife's reaction versus his own. Is he leaning into that old evolutionary trope?
Which one?
You know, the 1950s cartoon cliche of the woman screaming and standing on a kitchen chair while the man bravely handles the mouse. I'm generally pretty skeptical of evolutionary psychology being used to justify mid-century gender stereotypes.
That is a very valid skepticism. But the author actually pushes back on the crude interpretation of that trope.
Oh, he does?
Yeah. He argues that calling it simply fearfulness is really lazy. What we're really looking at are different sensitivity thresholds to uncertainty in confined environments.
Okay, unpack that for me. What is the actual mechanism there? Why would one sensitivity threshold look like fear and another look like curiosity?
Well, think about what a rodent represented historically in human evolution.
Okay.
A small, fast-moving rodent in a human dwelling wasn't a predator that was going to eat you, right?
Right.
It represented contamination. It meant disease. But most critically, it represented a massive, unseen risk to the winter food supply.
Oh, wow.
A few mice getting into the grain stores could literally mean starvation for a family months down the line.
So it's an existential threat, but a delayed one.
Exactly. So the recoil reaction, the sudden disgust and physical withdrawal, is actually a highly efficient pattern recognition system.
Interesting.
It prioritizes the early detection of boundary violation. The system fires off an alarm, the perimeter is breached, the food is at risk, avoid the contaminant.
So it is a completely rational, life-saving mechanism dressed up as an involuntary shudder.
Spot on.
And the male typical response, the leaning in.
That response, which tends to involve suppressing the immediate startle reaction, shifts toward analysis and control. It prioritizes inspection and intervention.
I see.
In engineering terms, one system is built to sound the alarm that the fortress has a hole, and the other system is built to locate the hole and plug it.
Both are valid.
Both evolutionary strategies are vital, but neither is complete on its own.
I love that phrase you just used, the fortress has a hole, because that completely changes how we view the kitchen itself.
How so?
Well, we build houses to impose order on nature. Architecture is basically just a psychological tool, right? A wall defines where our safe space ends and the chaotic outside world begins.
Yes.
A door regulates who gets to cross that boundary. We use rooms and straight lines to create predictability.
We convince ourselves that we have absolute control over our environment. The architecture is just a physical manifestation of our desire for order.
But the mouse entirely ignores the architecture. It doesn't use the door. It doesn't care about the wall. It travels through the drywall, under the sterile countertops, behind the refrigerator.
Right.
So what does this all mean for us? The unease we feel isn't just about the animal itself. The mouse is deeply unsettling because it proves that our fortress is an illusion.
Yes.
We think we are masters of this pristine, isolated box we call a house, and this 2-ounce creature just waltzes right through it, completely exposing our fake control.
That realization is profoundly destabilizing. And if you think about it, the trap was set specifically to reestablish that control.
Right, to fix the hole.
It was an attempt to reinforce the boundary. And ostensibly, it worked. The mouse is caught. The system is resecured.
Mission accomplished.
But then, Nemotin does something completely counterintuitive.
What does he do?
He has the mouse in the trap ready for disposals, and instead of throwing it away, he feeds it.
Oh, really?
He gives it a piece of a chocolate-covered nut.
That is such a bizarre pivot. Why would you feed the thing you just trapped? I mean, the trap represents a clean resolution. It means the problem is solved and the outcome is decided.
Exactly.
By dropping a piece of chocolate into that box, he ruins the cleanliness of the trap. He introduces this really strange form of empathy into a system that was designed for execution.
It introduces a massive contradiction. You have a creature in captivity, scheduled for disposal, and yet it is being nourished by its captor.
It makes no sense.
It breaks the internal logic of the situation. But what is truly fascinating is how the mouse reacts to this broken logic.
Which is how? Does it ignore the food?
No, it just accepts it. It doesn't hesitate, but it also doesn't eat greedily or frantically. The author observes that the mouse eats the chocolate purely functionally.
Functionally.
Yeah, it uses the exact same precise economical movements it was using to scan the room earlier. Its internal coherence remains completely intact. Even though the human has introduced this weird, contradictory gesture of empathy, the mouse isn't performing gratitude. It isn't performing distress.
Yeah.
It is simply incorporating the new caloric input and continuing to survive.
Okay, that is wild.
And watching this incredibly precise, functional movement within a highly structured environment, that's what triggers a connection for the author. This is where he brings in Ray Bradbury's science fiction story, There Will Come Soft Rains.
Oh, right. Man, if you listening haven't read it, it is a brilliant, haunting story.
It's truly a masterpiece.
It's about a fully automated, futuristic smart home that just keeps functioning long after a nuclear war has wiped out the human inhabitants.
Yep.
It keeps making breakfast, running the sprinklers, cleaning the floors for a family that is entirely reduced to ash.
It's chilling.
And one of the cleaning mechanisms in this house are these tiny electric mice that scurry out of the walls to sweep the floors with perfect precision.
The visual parallel there is so striking. Small-scale, high-precision, purposeful movement. But Nemotin uses this comparison to highlight the fundamental difference between living systems and mechanical ones.
Oh, I see.
The electric mice in Bradbury's story are executing a script. They operate in a completely closed loop. They don't know why they are sweeping up ash. They just know the code says to clean at a certain hour.
So the robotic mice are basically just running a program, but the real mouse in the plastic trap is actually playing the game in real time.
Exactly.
It's the difference between automation and awareness. The electric mice are governed by rigid rules, but the biological mouse is navigating raw uncertainty.
Yes.
It takes the chocolate not because a script told it to, but because it is aware of its environment and adjusting its survival tactics on the fly.
And we see the ultimate danger of that closed-loop automation in the failure mode of Bradbury's house.
Oh, remind me what happens.
Eventually, a tree crashes through the kitchen window. It knocks over some cleaning solvent onto the stove, and a fire starts. How does the perfect automated house respond to an unpredictable anomaly?
It completely collapses because the house can only respond within its predefined assumptions.
Right.
It sprays water from the ceiling, but when the water reserves run dry, it has no backup plan. It doesn't know how to adapt.
No.
It just keeps frantically shouting automated warnings and escalating its programmed responses until it literally burns itself to the ground. It cannot step outside its original design.
The system is perfectly efficient, but only within its assumptions. The moment an unscripted variable enters, like a fire or a real mouse, the rigid system shatters.
Wow.
The biological mouse, on the other hand, lives in a domain where unpredictability is the baseline normal. For a living system, adaptation isn't a special feature. It is continuous. Survival depends entirely on deviation, not compliance.
The robotic mice survive by complying with the code, but the biological mouse survives by deviating from the expected path.
That's the core of it.
That is an incredible insight to pull from a tiny plastic box on the floor. Which brings us right back to the philosophy of uncompressed thinking.
Yeah.
The trap worked. The mouse is caught. You could just dump it in the trash bin and move on with your morning. But Nemotin argues that doing so actually robs you of reality.
We love systems we can easily model. We love large, predictable systems, and we love tiny systems that we can safely ignore. But the mouse is that unstable middle.
Right.
It is small enough to evade our control, but complex enough to resist our attempts to simplify it. When we rush to label it like, oh, it's just a pest problem, we compress the event, we flatten it out just to save mental bandwidth.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. Think about your own daily routine, your inbox, your commute. Our instinct is always to label things immediately so we can stop thinking about them.
We crave closure.
We absolutely crave closure. But Nemotin is arguing that if you rush to closure with the mouse, look at everything you lose.
You lose so much.
You lose the bizarre physics of its movement. You lose the insight into human evolutionary architecture and why we build walls. You lose the tension between trying to control nature and feeling empathy for it.
You basically kill the structure of the moment. The goal of uncompressed thinking isn't to artificially inflate a small event into some massive philosophical crisis.
Right, it's not about overthinking.
Exactly. The goal is simply to prevent the event from shrinking. It takes mental stamina to look at the mouse and say, this is a pest. It is also a highly precise biological system. It is also a trigger for my evolutionary fear. And it is an adaptive agent surviving in a constrained environment.
All at the same time.
Uncompressed thinking means allowing all of those interpretations to coexist, even when they contradict each other.
It's incredible how much depth is hidden in a moment we'd usually just sweep into the garbage without a second thought. We started with a dollop of peanut butter and a piece of plastic, and we ended up exploring the fundamental difference between living systems that adapt and imitations of life that just execute code.
We explored the deeply rooted tension between our desperate need for control, our walls, our doors, our traps, and the undeniable reality of a complex, unpredictable world that constantly breaches those walls.
Which brings us to this brilliant synthesis from the essay to wrap up the narrative. Nemotin writes, "The trap defined the boundary, but the mouse revealed its limits."
The trap did exactly what it was designed to do, but the living creature inside it proved that control is always temporary.
The trap defined the boundary, but the mouse revealed its limits. But as we finish up today, I want to offer a slightly different angle on this for you to think about.
Okay.
We've spent this whole time analyzing the mouse as the unpredictable rogue variable. But what about us? Think about the routines, the rigid schedules, and the digital systems we rely on every single day to feel safe.
That's a great point.
What happens when we become Bradbury's automated house? We are increasingly building lives entirely out of closed loops and predictable scripts. We curate our feeds, we optimize our schedules, we try to eliminate all friction.
We want perfect control.
Right. But if we become too reliant on our perfectly automated routines, do we lose the biological capacity to adapt? If you completely eliminate the unscripted variables from your life, you might just become as brittle as that futuristic smart home. You might burn down the moment a real fire starts.
Wow.
So today, as you navigate your perfectly structured environments, maybe don't just look for the mice. Look at the walls you've built and ask yourself, if an unpredictable variable breached your perimeter today, would you know how to adapt? Or are you just running a script? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.